The importance of this topic of school design and construction is quite simply that between now and 2030, we're going to have to be building 640 new schools in the Metroplex. It's tens of billions of dollars of expenditure. And not only does expenditure need to be done correctly for educational reasons, but also for community design and smart growth reasons as well. So the outline of our presentation, our program, is basically tonight you're going to get 2 lectures. One is essentially the placement of schools in neighborhoods, and then how to connect those schools to the neighborhoods themselves. And then our second speaker will be talking about the physiology of learning and how that connects to architecture. Then next week, we'll have a lecture regarding the art and science of healthy schools, basically taking the placement of schools, the science of the physiology of learning, and basically translating that into architecture. And then the issue that basically trips up most of us when we start talking about green schools and smart growth and high-performance learning environments is basically how much does it cost? And so we're going to be discussing that in actually pretty fine grain, not only in terms of how much does it cost up front, but what are the paybacks. So it's a four layers of conversation, but it's the 4 layers that are really necessary to be able to deal with school design and placement with any kind of completeness. There is actually one thing that I wanted to go about, since I'm not in the education business other than I'm a dad, and I've been reading all this literature for years. I mean, one of the amazing things is whenever you meet a principal of a school or a superintendent, half the time they're doctors, and you know that they're not internists, right? They went out and they got their doctorate in education or administration, and they had to do a thesis. And there is not a topic out there that has been better covered than school performance. Whether it's design, whether it's placement, whether it's curriculum, whether it's teaching modalities, you name it, it's there. It is incredibly complete and robust. And the one thing that always kind of interests me is there's really nothing there that says what we're doing right now is the right thing to do. I just haven't stumbled across it. There is one thing that actually always kind of amazes me, which is this idea of how we term performance, right? So here we have a child in India recycling batteries, and that child is covered in lead dust. We all know that lead's bad for you. It's bad for you genetically. It's a heavy metal. It attaches itself. It's a calcium binder. The one thing that you know about this child is because of his exposure to lead, he'll have, on average, about a 3% lower IQ. His intelligence will be diminished by about 3% because of that exposure. The children here in the garden, in the sunlight, in their classroom garden, they're just kids in the environment. They're not being diminished. They're not even being enhanced. They're creatures in the environment that have a potential for learning, and they have a potential for rates of absorbing information that are kind of inherent. They were born with those. But what's really interesting is if you would apply how we term school design, if you would apply this idea of high-performance schools, where we say we have a high-performance school because it allows children to learn at their normal rate, then this would be called a high-performance environment, which it's not. This is a low-performance environment. This is hurting children. This is damaging that child's intelligence and its health. You might not be able to tell, although it looks like a Walmart. Can we turn off a couple of these lights? These are 2 schools. Essentially, the one up in the upper corner is essentially the child covered in lead. And the one down here is what is commonly called a high-performance or green school. And it seems to me that this should be called a green school for about the same reason that that other slide, that those children in the garden should be called a high-performance environment. Really what we should be talking about is that's just a school. That's a low-performance school. But here's how we sell them. when architects, I know there's a lot of architects in the audience today, when you go to a school district, you have to sell this as something better, something luxurious, and you come up with these financial benefits. This list of benefits goes with this school. And so you have to go to a school board and say, you're going to save $9 in energy a foot, you're going to save $1 in emissions, $1 in wastewater and water. This is interesting, $49. So the children that run through these, generations of children, that because this school has an anticipated 18% higher average standardized test scores and up to 25% higher rates of learning, that those students will earn enough money that over their life it'll equate to $49 per square foot of that school building. Asthma reduction, flu reduction, teacher retention. See, all these things are like, here's what we're saving. And I think it's actually an inappropriate calculus. What we should be doing is we should force anyone trying to do this to run through the same calculus. They should actually have to sell the financial costs of a low-performance school to the community, to parents, to school district, to administration. It shouldn't be up to us to prove that there are financial benefits to do the right thing. It really should be up to the architects that are selling this and the administrators selling it to the community to show that it's worth a loss of $71. Basically, whatever that school costs, it's going to be $71 more in total social costs and operational costs. How do you explain to a group of parents that we're going to build this, we're going to save $3 a foot, and you're going to have higher rates of asthma, higher colds and flu, you're going to have reduced teacher retention, which means you have, again, recruiting costs, training costs, lifetime earnings, the equivalent of $49 a foot. I mean, how do you sell that? You can't. And if we were forced to do this, if we were forced to actually, if we were forced to sell what we were actually building, we would never build it. So what I'm proposing is we take this idea of high-performance school design and we basically discard it. The term actually implies that, that healthy, well-designed schools are a luxury. They are not. They are a right of children. The term also implies that low-performance, unhealthy design is acceptable. Think about it. If we only had two terms, why wouldn't we have the two terms school design and low-performance school design? Why do we have to have school design and high-performance school design? The burden should be on the harm that we place on children through design. So actually, I kind of wanted to come up with a term that we could use, perhaps agree to for these 4 lectures, that really gets to the note of what we're trying to do, which is child-centric design. Design which is responsive to the biological and emotional and societal needs of children and which provides a healthy environment for children to learn at their natural rate and potential. It's kind of the Hippocratic oath for school architects, isn't it? Do no harm. If you're going to do harm, quantify it and sell it to the city, sell it to the community, sell it to the school board. It won't happen. We would never build another bad school again because none of us is actually up to admitting what a bad job we've done. So my job tonight is to talk about child-centric design at the neighborhood level. And what we're going to get, we're going to start with the needs of children based upon where we find ourselves societally and economically. And then we're going to start going into not only school design, but what is it that actually connects the schools to the neighborhoods. So here's what we have, here's where we find ourselves in 2000. This is our rate of increase in population growth, and at the same time, which is about doubled, a little more than doubled. And then you can see that we've gone up essentially 9 times in terms of the vehicle miles that we travel. You can see that the vehicle miles that we're traveling are as much steeper than our rate of growth of population. This is a DFW specific piece of information. As of 2005, we were standing in traffic, stopped, as in not moving, 58 hours a year. all right? By 2030, that's going to be 79 hours. And this is, you know, these are the people that build the roads. This is what they're designing to. Now, 2 weeks of vacation is a lot of vacation. And most of the world gets way more than that. We spend exactly that amount, and we at least expect to, stopped in traffic by 2030. Obesity trends among US adults, 85, 95, 2001. You can see that we've gone up to where most of the states are having between 15 and 20% obesity rates, intrinsic in their population, with Alabama actually over that. And we found the guy that pushed him over. But this isn't accidental. Okay, we're spending more time in our car, the cars are stopped, we're driving more, right? We're getting fatter. Why? Well, what about walking? We're spending more time in our car, we're getting fat for a reason. Well, percentage of trips from 74 to 95 decrease, percent of overweight adults increase. Look at that for children. They're steeper curves. Right? Our children are not walking, even short trips. Right? What did we walk to when we were kids? We walked to school. If you look at the early baby boomers, over 90% of us walked or rode a bike to school. Now in many cities, it's under 5%. Right? So, physical inactivity and overweight trend among youth. 1 in 3 high school youths do not encourage vigorous physical activity. Less than 30% go to PE. 1 in 7, 6 to 19 are overweight. Kids watch more TV than they attend school in a year. And this is actually a real term, the Veal Syndrome. This is what we're turning our children into, veal. Now, that could have, is a pen, but it could have a PS2 in there, right? Or it could be the middle seat of a Volvo going to school, right? Nevertheless, it's a young creature in a box that's being either carted away one place or carted away to another. Kids don't go outside. There's no place to go. There are no parks. And there's really no safe ways to get there. So, if we took the recipe of the situation that we find ourselves, where should we locate schools? Well, should we locate schools far away from students? What percentage of schools that we're building right now have those attributes? The vast majority of them. And there's several different reasons. One is land's cheaper and it's easy to acquire. But this is what you get in result. That school was open a couple weeks, and that's the kind of traffic that it encouraged. When you go out in the morning to drop your kids off at school or to go to work, roughly 25% of that traffic is there only to get kids to school. And we're building new roads, highways, tollways, right? We could cut 25% of morning traffic out by letting the kids walk to school. So, moms become a cab driver. My children are very lucky. We have my wife is a stay-at-home mom, and I have no idea how she does it. She's the most highly educated director of transportation that I personally know. And she carts those kids around, and when she saw this presentation, she actually said, yeah, it's probably about right, that a suburban mom spends about 17 full days a year carting their kids around. That's not 8-hour days. Those are 24-hour days, right? Now, this is scary. That's more time than they spend dressing, bathing, and feeding their children. Well, why is that? Well, I mean, there's one basic reason. It's what we've built, where we've built it, and how we've connected it. It purely comes down to that. Working moms, 1976, 39% with kids over 1, 72 in 2005, under 1, 31 and 55. And you go back to when most of us were kids, it was actually a very low percentage, probably well under 30%. So if the average mom spends all this time at work, all this time commuting, and 13 hours a week performing chores for the family, where are they really? That's where they're driving. They're driving to get mother's little helper, right? And quite frankly, I'm surprised that there isn't actually more of this going on, because we really have a situation that isn't tenable. Well, you know, here's the convenient solution to the inconvenient fact: neighborhood schools, whether it deals with the amount of traffic, the vehicle miles we travel, rates of obesity, whether it deals with time in traffic, whether it deals with general fitness. It all is taken care of by this one building located in the school. That's the solution right there. And it's not just walking to school. It's walking to Girl Scouts. It's walking to softball practice. It's walking to soccer practice. Right? It's about to where you need. Because you know what? Those kids aren't going to have a driver's license for another 12 years or 11 years. Right? So what do we do in the meantime? Well, here we have some statistics, 2004, from the National Association of Realtors and the Smart Growth America of People. Now, the realtors are not like the most forward-thinking people. They're very good at reading the market exactly the way it is right now. What do people want right now? And by the way, that green boomerang formica is awesome and it'll come back. So here's what they came up with. All these are amenities that people are seeking in their new neighborhood. Look at this walk to school. This is for all households. Sidewalks, housing mix, life cycle mix. In other words, can you stay in the same neighborhood for multiple moves? Because 85% of home moves are not because you found a new job somewhere, it's because your lifestyle changed. You need a bigger home, you need a smaller home, you need a fancier home. And we know this works in the Metroplex. This is, again, North Texas Council of Government statistics. This is actually pretty scary. If you go to an outer ring suburb right now, like McKinney, Anna, Melissa, the last two are actually closer to Oklahoma than they are to downtown Dallas. The average vehicle miles traveled per household per day is just under 70. The average for the Metroplex is 45. But look at these. Look at these very fine-grained, mixed-use, mixed-generational type of neighborhoods. Streetcar system in Dallas, historic streetcar neighborhood in Fort Worth, and McKinney. They're not only a very small fraction of being on the outer edge, but they're half or better the amount of vehicle miles traveled on average. There might be something there. So it's a matter of scale. So if we're going to have neighborhood schools, what size should they be? How do they fit? Well, this is a high school. It's on just under 100 acres. It's only for 2 grades, 11th and 12th grade. And you can see the scale is just amazing in terms of how these homes back to it. This is a 6-lane arterial. This is a 4-lane divided. I mean, this is essentially kind of a wasteland. You don't walk to it, you don't ride to it, you drive to it, and you get the heck away from it. That is a school that accommodates 9. It's walkable, it's small, blends in with the rest of the neighborhood, it's an appropriate scale. Now, large schools are not required. They're not even legally mandated. If you go and you look at the choices that state agencies across the country actually offer school districts, you can find that there are school sites that they allow to be 8 acres or under. But they have to choose small schools. So you have to make that first choice to be able to come up with the result of a small walkable school that's the appropriate scale for a neighborhood. So I'm going to go over these, and let's assume that these are the correct points. They're all intuitively kind of obvious, but Victoria and Peter are going to be dealing with those issues in the next 2 lectures. Small school advantages. And some of you might have actually heard that Victoria speak to this on KRA this afternoon. Higher rates of attendance, higher test scores, higher rates of extracurricular activities. Children feel safer, higher rates of parental participation. Teachers have higher job satisfaction. Is there any one of these that is open to debate, that anyone doubts in this room at all? All right, we'll move forward. Flexible pre-K through 8 schools. What are the benefits? Stronger social bonds between children, teacher, and parents, and also amongst those groups. More individualized instruction, stronger bond to neighborhood, and more efficient, longer walkability, which is really important. That mix of grades allows families to age in place throughout the school years of their children. In other words, they don't have to move to another neighborhood to be next to a walkable school again. So it's really important that not only does the neighborhood accommodate that in terms of the housing mix, it's important that the architects actually accommodate that with flexible schools. You throw a school up and you build it with concrete CMUs, it's inflexible. You can't change it. It's very difficult to change the programming, the ages that are dealt with, what goes on in the school, teaching modalities, etc. And we've got an example of a school that actually paid attention to that in terms of how it was built. So community design. You know, these are the two basic flavors, right? This is your conventional suburban model. This is your traditional model. Here you've got people separated by how much money they have, how big a home they have, and what happens in a building. Whether, you know, if your grandparents live there and you lived here and you want to go see grandpa and grandma, you have to come out here, go out to this arterial up, out to this arterial down, and there's not only is there a wall there, but there's a moat. I mean, it really is. These people are obviously scared of each other. If you want to go to the market, if you want to go to the school, everything is divided. There's everything in this that we all are very familiar with, except, you know, we've not gone the step of guard towers yet. Everything in this slide is in this slide. Everything that is in this neighborhood is in this neighborhood. And what's happened is you can see all this wasted space has been collected. All these different housing types have been blended. All these different commercial types have been actually allocated in a very logical way. And you look at and you've got a school. And the school is actually co-located with other amenities. In this case, open space and water amenities. So you've got a building that's given a prominent place that's actually the placemaker of the neighborhood. And it needs to be a beautiful, graceful, respectful building because it reflects the value of the neighborhood. So this housing mix, you know, we're going to have a robust neighborhood that ages well in place. We have to give people the opportunity to move amongst their different housing needs over the life of their time in the neighborhood. We can see here that we're growing in different proportions than we're used to. You know, traditionally when you come up and you ask about zoning, you find zoning that actually reflects 1960s housing demand. Big homes, big lots, that's it. In terms of what we're actually facing is, you know, it's a minority of households that have children. Actually, in terms of DFW in 2007, 21% of all the homes purchased were purchased by single women. You know, the discrimination, housing discrimination is alive and well in this country. We discriminate against single people. We discriminate against couples with kids. We discriminate against households that want an urban lifestyle. We discriminate against the elderly. If you want a really big home on a big lot, you're the target market, and you can find it everywhere. In fact, you can find it probably too many places. So 88% of our growth between now and 2030 is going to be households without children, but we're still building 640 new schools, which is kind of scary because it almost seems like we're going to have to be abandoning a lot of schools in place in actually fairly good locations to be able to hit that 640 number. So that's something that we're gonna deal with. You can see here people turning 65 annually. How do they use these facilities? How do we co-locate elder care? How do we co-locate facilities for senior citizens? Well, those need to be in the neighborhood as well. They have to all behave next to each other. So you've got these small buildings, residential buildings. They have to behave well next to larger buildings that have these civic facilities, whether it's a school, whether it's senior care, whether it's retail or office. So this is the way things have been built. Shelter monoculture, it's production built, it's easy to understand, it's a commodity. You move in and out it based upon how much money you have and where you are in your housing life cycle. Or you can have an intergenerational neighborhood. This neighborhood has townhomes, where this might be your first ownership home. There's multifamily over here. There are garden homes. You've got estate homes. And the interesting thing about it is here's a school. So what you have is you have the challenge of making all these buildings behave in an appropriate way that's in scale with the neighborhood where it's harmonious. So whether it is a townhome with a dormer or whether it's a manor home with a dormer, the quality of those details need to be equivalent. Right? That's how we maintain not only the look of the neighborhood, but the price of the neighborhood. People are afraid of small homes because they're afraid of the homes being worth less and pulling down their property values, which I've always found ironic because actually when you start looking at production building, you could find, before the big bust, probably cheaper now, you could find a top 3 national production builder, Wall Street builder, building a 4,000 square foot home on a 10,000 square foot lot for $180,000, which is what, like 43 bucks a foot, 45 bucks a foot. It's pretty scary. But here what we have is we actually have an enforcement of quality and design. And it starts with the street. How are the streets related to the buildings? How do the buildings relate to the street? How are they allocated in terms of proportionately? How are they required to face the street and have eyes on the street? Because eyes on the street is a big part of a neighborhood being defendable. And then the last thing is, what's the style of the building? This is actually kind of the least important thing, but it's something that a lot of consumers get involved with is, what are the features that make it compatible and harmonious up and down that block face between homes and uses? So what buildings actually behave well in a neighborhood? Well, here we've got a big building. You can see it has windows. It has windows for every unit, in fact. It has a light well. It's all brick. A lot of communities like all brick. It's all masonry. And that's the county jail. All right? So not the best building, not the best necessarily tendency to have in your neighborhood, but it's all brick. It has windows. It has light wells. Because, those murderers and thieves and Wall Street executives, they all have rights too, right? So they get their window. Now this is a little dark, but this is another building. You can see here their windows. Again, for every unit, they're light wells. That's juvie. That's the Dallas Juvenile Jail. And you know what? They all have windows and light wells and fresh air because, even though they're convicts, they have rights, right? I love this building. This is actually a really well designed building. You have doors that directly go outside. This could be a little bigger, this lawn. It has a light shelf, has clerestory windows here, ribbon window there. Again, it's amazing what it has in terms of, again, another clerestory there. That is actually a very good building. It's one that would fit in a good neighborhood. It's also the dog pound. It's a new animal shelter. Well, why all that light and all that access? Well, animals have rights too. You don't want to abuse an animal, right? So you need to give it access to fresh air and light and the outdoors. That's a school. That's actually a fairly new school. Let's see here. Do you see anything different between that school and, let's say, the county jail? Oh, right. There are no light wells. There are no windows. Well, there are windows. The top parts of these dark strips are windows. And that's so that those rooms have a minimum egress for fire access. In fact, those portable buildings have better ventilation and better access to light than that all masonry new middle school. I was asked if they have any bathrooms. It's right around the corner. Well, okay, they have to, you know what? I would still rather be in that than in that brick monstrosity. And here's how it's located. And again, this is not picking on a school district. This is common. This is how things work. Right? Here you have a middle school. There's no bike lanes. There are no sidewalks. There's industrial uses. That's actually a pickle plant, which is scary. Vats that birds fly over. I didn't know they made pickles that way. Yeah, I know who. Bus sheds. And you can see here that this is completely surrounded by concrete. It actually has kind of a penitentiary type of site plan to it. If you'd pull up the county jail, you'd pull up juvie, you'd see very similar kind of attributes to it. So this is a brand new school. And if you saw the sign right there, I like this part of it right here. To me, this is really cynical, because this actually always happens. And I'm not going to go into the terminology that the architects use for that. It's very offensive. But this is the rendering that goes. Does anyone see it? Does anyone see that? It's right there. That does not describe the school. That is a lie. It's a blatant lie. And there's only a couple reasons that you could actually expect that lie to even be attempted. One is, I think it actually makes people who voted for this feel. I think it allows the community to be relaxed until they see what happens. I also think that it's a classic rope-a-dope to get kids to go in the building, right? You got that, and then once they get in the building, well, that's what they got. And that's actually a pretty good scenario, because at least those kids. That building is awesome. That building, I wouldn't mind living next to that building. That building has workable windows. It has light. Every classroom has one full wall of windows. I talked to the principal of the school, and he said if he was ever transferred, he would quit. He would not want to go to one of those schools. He said this is the best job he's ever had. So are the kids any different? He goes, well, the school actually, this building allows them to be themselves. Look at this, 1963. What did we do? What have we forgotten? That these guys here, William Collip and A. Sowell and Vernon Jackson, I mean, these guys put their name on a building they could be proud of because it's still a positive factor in the neighborhood. It still fits, it has human scale, it treats the children in such a way that they can reach their potential. So once we've decided that we need to have a school that has the right scale, that is appropriately attractive, right? That meets neighborhood standards in terms of its behavior as a building, how do we get there? Because once you get past the school, it's not the school district's fault anymore. It's the development industry, it's city administration, it's zoning practices, it's engineering practices. I mean, this is definitely a dance macabre. So what we have here in a well-connected neighborhood is, if you live here, you basically walk to school. You walk down the street, go through a park, boom, you're at school. If you go into this typical subdivision of cul-de-sacs, you have to walk out to the arterial, another arterial, and to the school. Now, the distance between the homes is the same. The distance to school is quite a bit different, but more importantly is the quality of that walk is deadly. I mean, there are a lot of places you can walk along an arterial and feel safe. I wouldn't want my kids walking to school along that's actually not even a particularly big road. Every time I see this picture, I get, as a dad, I'm a little freaked out. Right? This is exactly why we don't let our children walk to school or anywhere. This is the reason why. It's because the connective tissue between our homes and anywhere else is so badly done and so dangerous and so degrading that we've changed the behavior of our children to the detriment of their health. So where do we start? We start with this. We start with the roads. So what do you think the school district did when they saw this? They built the school. They saw this happening. What's the logical thing to do? Sidewalks? Street trees? Road diet? Nah, they just prohibited walking and biking to school. So instead of actually, treating the disease, they just treated the symptom. This is a cheap and easy way to do it, and people accepted it. It was actually pretty shocking. Now, walking is one of the most dangerous things you can do as a traveler. It's quite a bit more dangerous than driving, way more dangerous than flying, right? And we just kind of saw a reason why. Dallas-Fort Worth is the 9th most dangerous place to walk in the United States. And so what happens is, since we won't walk our neighborhoods, we actually go to the fitness center to get our exercise, right? We spend a couple $100 a month so we can go be on a Stairmaster, watching CNN, right? And so what does this do to the quality of life in the neighborhood and sociability, social connections, etc.? So you got the adults working out at the fitness center and the kids at home playing PS3 getting fat. Well, traffic calming. We could go after the root causes of our problems and the reason we don't let our children walk, which is fatalities. And you can see here in terms of the rate of fatality between 40 miles an hour and 20 miles an hour. So if we're going to actually pursue neighborhood schools, we actually have to make sure that they're safe to walk to, which is right here, 20 miles an hour, slightly above. So if you get hit by a car and they're roughly doing 20 miles an hour, I'm sorry, kind of got cut off right there. 60 miles an hour. Minor injuries, abrasions, 20 miles an hour, you get some lacerations, goes all the way down. Here's what's interesting, 36 miles an hour, if you don't die right away, you're over 90% likely to die within 30 days. That's 36 miles an hour. So if we're going to design these neighborhood schools, how do we connect? Well, we need to make sure that we design our roads to be 25 miles an hour and slower with anywhere within that neighborhood to get to that school. It's totally, absolutely doable. What's wrong with this picture? At 36 miles an hour, it's absolutely going to kill you. 45 for a school zone. So, how should we measure places? This is the way places are measured right now without exception. We develop neighborhoods. That's what my firm does, right? When we go in with a neighborhood plan, this is how they measure it. This is the metric. It's the biggest, most inefficient, poor-turning vehicle that could actually logically be purchased. And everything we do is measured off that. What we should do is we should go back to the basics, which is we should measure places based on who we want to be using that place, who are the most vulnerable, in this case, children. In this case, this is my daughter, Princess Peppy. And what we did is we went out to new neighborhoods. And we said, look, what happens if we measure these places in Peppy units, in a 9-year-old girl's unit instead of the Hummer? This is the minimum dimension for an entry road, a residential collector into a new neighborhood in Dallas, Texas. Right? This is what you have to do. Right? It's very difficult to get an exception to this. There's my daughter. Okay? Essentially, that's like 4 lanes undivided. They put a stripe down the middle of it. What you'll find is, what you can barely see is, there are no windows looking at the space. There are no homes fronting on it. There's fences. The builders built the fences back here for cost reasons, but within about 5 years, experience tells me that that fence will be brought all the way to the front of the home. There will be no way for that child to be observed within that street. That street is over wide, and it's actually fairly deadly in terms of the speeds that are going through there. But look at this. The sidewalk is right next to that street, and there's actually no shelter for the child. This is the same context. This is a street going into a neighborhood, and this is using some of the new national safe street standards. This is a residential collector. There's my daughter, right? Here's the difference. That's 36 feet of pavement with an 8-foot median. That's just a couple feet wider of total pavement. Here you've got homes fronting on this, so wherever that child is, whether it's along the 6-foot wide sidewalk, this 8-foot parkway with trees, or in any of these lanes, they're observable. That actually, I wouldn't mind my child walking along or even crossing. The average speed on that road, by the way, is under 20 miles an hour. Residential street. This is the one that you'd actually find your home on. Here you've got one that's 32 feet. Some homes side on it, no windows. Some homes front on it. Again, sidewalk pulled against the curb, trees pulled away from the sidewalk. And so it's not only a poor pedestrian environment, it's still fairly deadly. You still see cars going there 35, 40 miles an hour. It's a very long run. That's the exact same context, 24 feet across, easily walkable, and then you can see that there's parkway landings and street trees, and they're short blocks. In other words, you either stop or you turn, right? You don't hit any cul-de-sacs. So speeds actually don't build up. The sidewalk, 4-foot sidewalk. Here's a 6-foot parkway. I actually looked for this in the same neighborhood. We're in the same 2 neighborhoods. That sidewalk is too narrow for 2 adults to walk next to each other. So what you will find in this that parents with kids with strollers will be in the street. You'll see it like whenever you see adults or parents with strollers in the street, they're walking in the neighborhood, they'll be in the street. They're street trees, or excuse me, they're yard trees. Every home has a tree. Look at their pole. There's no way that pedestrian same type of context. Here we've got homes fronting, they're close to the street, we've got side, we've got front porches, balconies, bay windows, streets, 6-foot sidewalk, 8-foot parkway, street trees that when they're mature will not only cover the sidewalk, they'll also cover the street. And the Berkeley Livermore Labs calculated that 8 to 11 degrees cooler in the summer because of how it's been planned. Whether it's harnessing prevailing winds, whether it's using white concrete, whether it's using street trees, whether it's the street trees covering the sidewalks. Right? It's thoughtful design as opposed to pro forma mandatory design. So there was a park in both these neighborhoods. This is the crossing. There's my daughter. That is 32 feet. From a 5-foot sidewalk to a 4-foot sidewalk. There's a 2-foot parkway because they get away with it. There's the same crossing to the street. That's 18 feet. And the reason that's so narrow is that on the other side of this park, on the other side over here, there is a lane coming the opposite way. It's basically Pinwheel Square, where you go around it one way. Right? That's actually very safe crossing for a child because, especially when you have cars parked here with the street trees when they're mature, it's naturally calming. So when I got my daughter to the park in this neighborhood, that's all she found. She was really upset because I said, let's go to the park. We're going to the park. And that's all that was left. After they spent all that money on the concrete, and after they wasted all that land in this kind of big lot subdivision, that was all that was left. And they were allowed to call it a park, even though it's really just a drainage ditch. These 2 neighborhoods have about the same density that I've shown you. About the same density, about 3.5 to 4. Those are 2 parks that are built into the neighborhood. They're either attached parks or this is the park that has the road that goes around it, the one-way system. Safe parks. All of this is properly documented. This is Institute for Traffic Engineers. This is a federally sponsored document. This also has the American Society of Civil Engineers. This is not mysterious stuff. This is stuff that's proven. It's available. It's free. It's in many states, it's actually state mandated. The state of Texas just actually adopted these standards, but it's up to us to get our local communities to use them because you know what? If we don't get these standards, walkable schools, even if they're the most darling little glass cubes that are great for children to be in, they still can't get to them. So, another interesting issue, especially with daylight savings time, if you want your kid to be able to walk to baseball practice or to Cub Scouts or whatever, right? How many of us are not in traffic, once the sun is set during the winter hours? It's actually fairly common. If we don't plan ahead for our communities to be safe at night, we won't use them at night. This is the same piece of neighborhood. Here's the school, by the way. Turn off the lights. And this is the maximum allowed number of streetlights with their light performance that's allowed in this particular city. And you can see that when you're walking along this street, that you might actually be able to see this light from here if you're like walking with the Hubble telescope. It's a very long walk. For children is, children get hit, typically when you look at a pedestrian incident between a car and a child, happens mid-block. Kid darts out between cars, chasing a ball, etc. So what happens, this is actually extremely dangerous, because what happens, a driver will come through the intersection, their pupils will constrict, right? They'll lose their night vision, they'll go through the intersection, they'll be momentarily blind, and that's when they hit a kid. It's not only not enough lighting, it's actually also lighting that's too bright. So what we did is, we went to what's called a 2-foot candle standard. The outside of this white area is 2-foot candles, about you have in 2 candles at a foot away. And these are smaller lights. That's why the white dots are smaller, but they're basically continuous. So when you drive through there, you actually don't lose all of your night blindness or your night sight, but you also don't need it all. You're also observable, and it's actually a safer and more satisfying pedestrian experience. It's also highly illegal. Okay? It took 4 years to get permission to do this. Even though in this particular city, the city does not pay for streetlights, and they don't pay for the operation or maintenance for 20 years. It was completely free. Do you know why they didn't want to do it? You're going to love this. After 4 years. They didn't want us to be able to do it because then everyone would want it. Now, how twisted is that? Okay, so not only do we need to have the right types of streets connect in our schools, but in order for our children to be able to safely use them and feel good about using them, and for us to feel good about them using it, we have to actually make sure that they're useful. That's the community. There's the school. That was the original design. That's the school built. Here's another example. This is an old municipal airport. That was a design that was done by Andres Dewani and his crew at DPZ. And what's interesting in this is that there's no school. We couldn't get the school district interested. But after we actually had developed the first phase, the school district actually moved in to the neighborhood. There's a gentleman named Steve Waddell, and he's actually, without a doubt, the smartest, most compassionate school superintendent I've ever met. And he not only got the walkable school thing, but he put a charrette together that included faculty, teachers, included administrators, included Cracker Jack architects, which actually are sitting here right now. And they said, how do we actually get a school to be placed in a neighborhood that's already started, that already has a design, that already has requirements in terms of architecture and pedestrian accessibility, and actually kind of politeness. And just to show you, the neighborhood has, these are row homes. Actually, we did the row homes because we had teachers that complained they couldn't afford to live in the neighborhood. We have villas, we have township homes, we have manor homes. And you can see what we did is, because of the rules of the new urbanism of good design, they're very robust. And as long as the building behaves, it can find a place in a neighborhood. So you can actually have an existing neighborhood and find a place for a school as long as it behaves properly. And so you can see here, HKS, Mark Vandervoort's here. What they did is they said, well, there are 2 sides to this block. We have kind of an urban frontage, and we've got more of a residential row home frontage. Originally it was 18 acres. We got it down to 10 acres, and actually it could have been 8 acres. And the neat thing about it is very walkable on one side, and it allows for parents that don't live in hometown to drive to the back of the school through very kind of insightful use of the environment. And you can see that as they work through the designs, does this look any different than a Walmart? Yes, it does, right? Because they're being sensitive to context. This building actually is very polite to the neighborhood, and it's actually very polite to inhabitants. And there it is built. It has geothermal power, or heating and cooling. It is essentially on 10 acres, it can be on 8 acres. It's masonry, it's walkable, the bike racks are always full, and it was $5 a foot less money to build than the typical Texas elementary school. Why aren't we always doing this? Why isn't this the default case? And you can see here that this is a list of master plan communities in North Texas. This is the neighborhood that we were just in. You can see it has the third highest price per square foot in this sample. And about a third of the homes were those townhomes in this phase, right? What happened to small is cheap? It's not. Here you can see here we had the highest percentage of what they call open market performance. So people were willing to pay 21% more to be in this neighborhood than in our competing conventional neighborhoods, which is actually great for tax base. It's a great way to pay for the school, even though that school is less expensive. So it's a rational business case to make to city officials, to county officials, to school officials. Would that go well in that neighborhood? Does this go well in any neighborhood? Where does this belong? Would you want this in your neighborhood? This is what we're building. And we have to basically, we have to take into account the ramifications of what we're doing. This neighborhood that we did, again, we have a blended variety of home types. 12,000 square foot estate lots, 4,000 lots for seniors, all anchored with open space that lead up to an elementary school. Neat thing about this elementary school is that all the open space, the ball fields and the playground, there's a gate here. They're available to the community, they're available to Parks and Recreation. Those facilities are co-located so that they're useful all week long. The really neat thing about this is that there's a swimming pool amenity center right here, and the neighborhood has a deal with the school that they can give their kids swimming lessons there. They can do picnics there. They can have little class outings there. So it's actually a public-private co-location. It's actually, you have to work for this. This is 2 years of zoning. Here's another one. That's an underground, it's a water line easement that we turned into a boulevard. There's a school. It terminates an entry road. This is a greenway that goes through the community that we fronted homes on. And it is actually kind of a crossroads. There's a greenway that goes through this way and also kind of north-south that lead to this school. So not only is it really walkable, we want to make sure that it was observable in terms of homes fronting on the greenway. Here's 1 square mile of Phoenix suburbs. It's 1 square mile. That's a middle school. There's a high school up here, and there's an elementary school here. Okay? 1 mile, 1 mile. Those homes are essentially all the same. This is that same square mile redesigned, 3 times the housing on it, with all the storm drainage being dealt with bioswales and natural systems, with office and retail, with the context-directed thoroughfares and arterials, and we have 2 K through 8 schools. Now, the bigger model is that this is 1 mile, but that school serves this mile, and that school serves this top mile. And the way the housing mix was calculated is that you could move there for your first apartment out of college, get your first home there with a townhome, become a nesting family in a villa, township, manor, move down again. You would never have to move out. You would never have to move outside of this square mile. And yet your children could go to school in this neighborhood from 18 months old through 8th grade. And they would never have more, literally they would not have more than, this mile walk is actually, it'd be considerably less than that on average. So developers have a lot of responsibility here as well. The zoning regimes, the school districts have very tight budgets, and they're almost like binge eaters. When they can find a piece of land, they have to buy it and bank it, and they have to buy it at a reasonable price. But unfortunately, because of how we zone residential land, in this country, it makes it very expensive. So I put together, these are 3 real cases. I mean, this is really a set of numbers that was prepared for a neighborhood. It's 125 acres, minimum lot size at 8,400 square foot lots, which gave us about 3.2 lots per acre. And you can see that on 125 acres, we get about 400 lots. If we put a school in that neighborhood, right, if we're going to sell a school site, be an 18-acre school site because that's an elementary school, and we would have the same minimum lot size, which means that we would lose lots. We would end up with about 58 fewer lots. The city has a minimum lot size as opposed to a maximum number of homes. And you can see that revenues between those 2 cases is about $2.3 million. The developer has to make up that much money to break even. Now, one little change, one tiny change, and we've been seeing it all this presentation, which is what happens if you allow for mixed generational housing to occur, where you've got a variety of sizes of homes of equivalent quality that are literally in the same neighborhood. And you can see this, the 125 acres will actually get you the same 400 lots, but there'll be 135 small, then 200 medium, and 65 large lots. And those could be like 12,000 foot lots. They're actually well above the 8,400. Really big, and you've got modest. Same neighborhood, we've seen how it looks. And you can see here at the end of the day, you run all the numbers. If you don't have a school, that's a break even. If you have a minimum lot size and you have to sell to a school district, it's $3.28 a foot to hit that break even. Okay? If the city allows for this multi-generational housing model, again, with all the architectural requirements, 38 cents a foot. That's the break even. So the effects of zoning are actually really dramatic. Using minimum lot size as opposed to a maximum number of homes drives site costs for schools almost 900% higher in this example. In many cases, it's actually way over that, but 900% was dramatic enough. The estimated average new home price for the 3 scenarios were roughly equivalent. However, in our experience, a well-located, well-designed neighborhood school actually makes the generationally mixed neighborhood more valuable. This is another one of, this is the same school that I showed you at Hometown. And the same school district decided to reuse it. This is, Mark, how big is this site? 8 acres. It's 8 acres. This is an 8-acre site. Here's a school that was built. It's actually, it was tired, needed to be replaced. They needed to have a larger school because the child population in the neighborhood went up, and they also wanted to keep it, walkable. They didn't want to have to go out and acquire a new site. So what they did is, while this school was still operating, they built this other new urbanist school that actually hugs the curb line, that respects the neighborhood, that's inherently walkable. And then when they finished it, they got rid of the old one. So now the neighborhood has a really nice park on this side. The neighborhood loved it, because what was the alternative? Losing their school and having to cart their kids 10 miles out. Right? So even if you've got a situation where you have a small school site, an old school, that doesn't mean you have to kind of be satisfied with what you've got. You can actually go out and upgrade your school, and what that does, it actually will allow your housing values are going to go up as well. Develop and increase the sustainability of existing inner-ring suburbs. Now this is kind of this is our last example here. This is actually really unfortunate. This is a neighborhood. This is a city that is just having a freeway put through it. And you can see here, here's a high school, middle school, elementary school. Middle school, elementary school. Here's some municipal ball fields, and they're completely separate. Here's a city football soccer facility. There's a fence there. You can see here that there's no connectivity from this neighborhood up there. This school was not anticipated, so there's no possibility to connect. This road right here has the longest turning lane I've ever seen, because there's no way to get to these schools other than that road. And this is what it looks like. This is the front of the school. This is the middle school. There's one bicycle there. This is yesterday. There was one bike. There's that single gate into that soccer field football. It's locked. You have parking in front of it, and there's debris here that you can step on to get over that wet spot on the sidewalk. Now, it's too bad you can't quite see this enough. Can you see any windows? You're not. It's a bad picture. There's one, and it's right there on this portable. That's it. You're looking at 9 classrooms. There's one window, and it's actually fairly abused. There's a side dumpsters, emergency power. You've got street trees, but they do no. They don't cover pedestrians. Originally, they were to cover up how ugly the school is, but now that they've grown up, you can see underneath them. Here you've essentially got 6 lanes divided. If that gets carried through, that'll be a 50, 60 mile an hour road, and it's between 2 schools. 4-foot sidewalk, street trees, they put all the money into it. There's no benefit there for children. There's no benefit for any pedestrian. There's the elementary school. They've got glass block at the end of the hallway. It's kind of like when you die and your brain is kind of shutting down, you see a white light at the end of a tunnel. That's like this. That's the only field they've got. They can't play on it because that's a 6-lane collector or arterial, and that's how they actually inexpensively got rid of their drainage. There's the back of the school. Have you seen a window yet? There's the playground. They didn't plant any trees here. There's the playground extension in front of those cars. Those are the ball fields. There's no way for a child to get there, especially an elementary child. There's been no thought about using those fields. There's a side entrance. Now, I was really happy to see this. I thought I saw some windows. And when I looked at the inmates, there are 2 children and there's the guard. That's what they've got. That was their kindergarten area. Okay? Look, I'm not mentioning a school district. These are all over Texas. Now, this is just a sanctioned form of child abuse. There's no other way to describe it. It's parental abuse, too. You see the lines that get to the school in the morning just to drop kids off. Now, there's one thing you can say for the school. There are 3 bikes there. It's 300% more bikeable than the middle school. So here's what we've got. This is what we started with. Those are the backs of homes. There's no connectivity. You've got 100% of access coming through these arterials. You've got absolutely no open space that's usable. No connectivity to these civic spaces. And so we planned this entire area, and you can see here that there's that familiar mix of housing. Here you've got mixed use that has office, retail, multifamily, over retail, independent living for senior citizens, industrial space, church. Here's a zoom. What we did, and actually Peter Brown speaking next week. He's the lead-off speaker. He worked on this. This is his design. Here you've got row homes and live works. Again, tutors. It's a fairly affordable housing, but now you can have teachers that actually live near where they work. Pre-K and a children's garden, edible landscaping. So even as that looked, even as ugly and hostile, with a community vision, you can actually turn it into something really cool. Peter is going to go over how the buildings can be transformed. Again, there is so much information out here on how to do this. It is the most documented, common sense, scientifically based system of design and design criteria ever in human history. I don't think we know how to design anything better than really good schools. I also know that we actually don't do it. And all these are posted on the CNU NTX website. They're yours to download. So, John Johnson High School at the turn of the last century. That is an outstanding school. I would have liked to have gone there. I would have liked my kids to go there. when they have the class reunions, you have old codgers show up. Now, how is that going to be considered in 100 years? How's that going to be considered next year, 20 years from now? Well, I can tell you that John Johnson High School is still being used. But when they have a class reunion, you have 80 the walkers with the tennis balls on the legs coming up to relive old times because it's loved. It's loved by the neighborhood, it's loved by generations, and it's something that we forgot how to do. So, school-centered neighborhoods. School placement is a critical planning issue. It's not just a school district issue. School placement influences the quality of life for children and adults. That driving thing, it's the obesity thing, it's the accessibility to extracurricular activities. They require interjurisdictional and interdepartmental cooperation. School districts and cities have to cooperate, especially in that zoning thing, so that they can pay 38 cents a foot instead of, almost $4. You have to get the roads right, and you have to get lights right. That's where this interdepartmental piece comes in, because even if the planning and zoning people get it, they have to get the engineering people to get it, and the transportation. Right? There's a tremendous amount of cooperation required to do the right thing. The quality of a school dictates the quality of life and economic sustainability of the neighborhood. This is the most plain fact that I think we could actually come up with. And then planners and architects have the technical knowledge, but the missing ingredient is community vision and leadership. None of this works unless there is local pressure to do it. Thank you. I'd say the virtuous way to go about this is this all makes sense, right? I think we all get this, whether we're parents or not. If we understand why we should do the right thing, we actually have it well documented on what that thing is. It's educators interfacing with designers. It's the people who build these construction technocrats at the school district level being responsible and responsive to educators and parents and children. It's the distribution of technical knowledge about schools to cities and city staffs. But, I had this, I was going to bring this up earlier. I pulled this out of the paper. There was a 6-month-old child who died in a crib, and it was really tragic. And as a result of that, they recalled 20 models of crib. A total of 635,000 cribs were recalled because that one child died, and they were afraid that another child could die, right? So we're talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars to recall something that was obviously defective and killed a child. And the only reason, does anyone know why they did this? Does one guess? Liability, right? It's because it's a defective product. And we have a legal system that punishes organizations and individuals that produce defective products. Whether it's a crib, whether it's a car, whether it's a car seat, whether it's a tainted food, right? What's interesting is that we build clearly defective schools. And not just defective on one point, across the board defective and dysfunctional, where we can assign traffic fatalities, asthma, cold and flu, depression. We can calculate to the dollar what the reduced earnings of a child is going to be, and we can multiply that times a generation of kids that are going to go through that school, right? And we do nothing about it, right? If we have a child that gets killed in a crib, we have zero tolerance. And so one of the things that we can do, along with the good-natured informational piece, is we need to actually have zero tolerance to bad schools. We need to get design rage. We need to be actually upset when we see that a Walmart is actually more considered in its design than a middle school. And unfortunately, we have to do both at the same time. I don't think we actually get to where we need to go in a short enough period of time unless we start holding design professionals responsible for their engineering and for their design. If we had a bridge engineer who knows how to design a bridge, and the client said, you know, I don't have enough money for that. I want you to use cheaper steel. I want you to use thinner steel. I want you to use less concrete, less cabling, right? What does the engineer do? They don't do it. They don't sign the drawings, right? Unfortunately, we have too many school architects that say, yes, sir, and they do it. It's because they're not going to be held responsible. The school that I showed up there, the middle school with no windows, okay? You can go to the website of the architect that designed it, and you can pull up PowerPoint presentations for good design. What about if the crib manufacturer had a PowerPoint presentation on their website about good crib design, and they didn't follow it? So there's a double standard. We have to hold architects same standard that we hold other design professionals and manufacturers, and we have to hold school districts to the same accountability. Tonight there's a couple of things. You can do the walking school bus. You know, if you have a neighborhood that you're concerned about children being conveying themselves to school unaccompanied, you can put together a group of parents and do a walking school bus so that they're supervised. Parent in front, parent in the back. They walk in train, they get to school, they get the exercise. You can go to your municipality, you can ask for bike lanes. Alan Stewart is working on converting really a dastardly 60s kid killer residential collector. It's just completely out of scale, and they've tried everything, bumps and humps and trapezoidal, crosswalks, everything. And yet, there's a community activist who's coming up with bike lanes. You can do what Highland Park does, street trees. You call them up. They have a city tree farm. They come out for $100 or so. They plant a street tree. That's traffic calming. If your street is too wide, right, and you want your kids to be able to play in the front yard on the weekends, have a treaty. I don't know about how your households work, but my car, the Dadmobile, is parked all weekend, and we get into my wife's cargo hauler, and we do everything together. Well, parking that Dadmobile or that second car that's not being used on the street is traffic calming. That's actually way more effective than speed bumps. People will blow over speed bumps, but they don't want to hit your car because it might damage their car. So that's actually a way of getting traffic calming. You can go to your city and you can ask them to come in and narrow your street. You can have them put in traffic circles instead of traffic lights. There's so many things that you can do, and the places to start are literally in your neighborhood. You can go to here's a real no-brainer. Go to your neighborhood school and have them open the windows. Have them take the paper off the windows, right? You go through the town. We just had this big scandal. I didn't see it as a scandal, but the newspapers made a lot of it, where DISD didn't make their 2010 goal of excellence, right? They're going to hit it next year. I think Michael's doing a great job. It's a tough district, right? What's really ironic is if you go through the district and you go to some of the best schools that we have, schools that were before the 70s, just walls of windows, operable windows, walkable, just truly outstanding. What you'll find, more often than not, is paper taped to the windows with either children's work or a teacher's theory that the kids will become distracted. Well, you can just go to school tomorrow, talk to the principal, and have them tear the paper down. That's free. That's immediate. That is now. And my gut feeling is, being a Dallas citizen, is we would have made that 2010 goal if we would have just done that. That would have had enough of an increase in our average test scores to have gotten us over the hump. That one free thing we would have hit the goals.
Don't you think that people operate from a climate of fear, and so they're afraid that kids will get distracted, they're afraid that kids will get loud, if they open the windows, everybody's got asthma, the kids have a breathing time. There are 50,000 reasons why
We have to earn it. We really have to earn the trust back. You know, a lot of it's the media. I mean, what's interesting is you'll see the story of the kid being run over, but it won't because the road's too wide. It was misdesigned. You'll see the article on bullying, right? Well, what's interesting is we're building schools that actually optimize bullying because kids have lower sociability and connectedness because they stay in a school for too short a period of time and they're too big. I mean, we're actually causing the problems. You know, the asthma, we have higher rates of asthma in these conventional schools than we do in these child-centric schools. I mean, we're creating our problems. Child obesity. When was the last time you saw that in the newspapers? You know, we need to actually start paying attention to the right things, which is we're hurting our kids, we're hurting our communities, we're hurting our future. You know, the schools. This blew me away. The schools that we showed tonight are illegal in the rest of the world. They're illegal in Europe, and they're illegal in China. They're illegal in China. Peter's working in China. He looked at those schools and he goes, "I'd be thrown in jail. I'd have my architect's license pulled." This is the only place in the first world where we allow this kind of child abuse. Well, what's really interesting is the development community gets this. You know, as long as the schools behave properly and they serve the community and they're attractive, and the developer doesn't have to lose a lot of money. And I showed a break even, you know, really inexpensive break even. You know, they're fine. They will go along with this. It's a community asset. The TxDOT actually they've approved these codes. I mean, TxDOT actually is way ahead. Dallas County is ahead on context-directed thoroughfares. Both the communities that I showed, with my daughter in the street, the conventional and the traditional streets are both in Dallas, right? So it's a matter of, you know, instead of a 4-year fight to get street lighting that's appropriate, I mean minimally appropriate, right? It should be required, right? Everyone should have it. And you know what, it's really interesting. You know what the difference is in those 96 smaller lights than the 26 big ones is essentially the same as 3 Christmas bulbs that you have around your house. 3. It's about 21 watts, 21 amps. So the place I get the most trouble from are ISDs. And it's really interesting because the people that build the schools, they seem to be completely autonomous from the people who use the schools. Whether it's faculty, whether it's staff, whether it's children, whether it's parents. You know, you go in there and say, why isn't this field open to the community? Well, the community messes up. Why don't you have a white roof? Because Herb, the roof guy who's on staff, doesn't know how to fix them. Literally, this is a quote. The guy's name was Herb even. Why don't you have windows? Because kids with ADHD get distracted. Well, that's not true. Then what about the other 96% of your students? Oh, well, they'll learn anywhere, quote unquote. The next one, why don't you have windows in your school? They break. Our insurance company doesn't like that, quote unquote. What's the next one? Why don't you have windows in your school recently? We don't like washing them. It's expensive to wash them. I mean, seriously, all these are, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, right? And these are the toughest piece to get is to get through that individual that's responsible to build the school. Because it's a tough job. They've got budgets, they've got methodologies, they've got site requirements that they're competing with developers, and they're subject to city regulation in that it regulates development. And so the toughest piece to get through is that. The second toughest piece is the cities, which is allow zoning, which gives the school district affordable, well-located sites. and then allow for the infrastructure to connect to those sites so that they're walkable. So they don't build a K through 8 school that they're going to only end up with kids in the neighborhood that are, 5 and 6, because they don't have the housing mix, right? Those are the two toughest things. What I get is last question, then we have to let Victoria get up and running. Are you ready to go? Okay.
I have to confess, I'm a paper cutter window person. I have a whole wall, all glass. The problem is that the same thing you face when you started your presentation was bright light. We're in technology, and I showed you the projector, so we're talking. We went back, we do a simple technology, I have all of it, then they wouldn't see the projector. It's too bright.
You're a very nice person, and I'm trying to figure out how to respond to that in a nice way. Okay, so I want to synthesize this. So your kids are going to have more asthma, more colds, more flu. They're going to have lower rates of learning and lower test scores because there's an allergic issue with chalk.
No.
Are you not interesting without a projector because you seem like an engaging person? No, seriously. Have you ever, seriously, the thing is like, the projector goes. If you're saying that you can't do this because they can't see the projector, change your teaching modality. So how about this? Was the paper on the windows when you moved in the classroom?
No.
How long were you in the classroom before you did that?
Let's see. Well, I was originally in a room that had an elevator shaft where we started kids into that room. And so then I moved into a room accommodated for 24, so now I have 32. I'll make you do. I'll take the paper down.
Yep.
And we'll see we'll see.
You know what I'd like to deal from you? Is that I'm just a real estate guy. I am just a dirt pusher, right? But we've got Victoria coming up next, and she's going to talk about the physiology of learning. What happens when sunlight hits a child's skin, right? And I'd like you to compare all the benefits of daylighting and fresh air to your use of a projector. And we're not even going to ask you. You can jump up and tell us, but we're not going to ask you. And then next week, we've got Peter Brown's going to come in and talk about how those physiological facts are integrated into the learning environment. So if you want to keep your paper up for a week, if Victoria's not convincing enough here coming up, then I'm sure your paper's coming down next week.
Open the windows, and I'll document how many kids look at the window and then listen.
Hey, if they're looking out the window, it's not their fault. All right, are you up and running? All right, let's take a little break. That's a good call.